Hi, welcome to Starcat's Right Stuff. I'm Nikki Starcat Shields, author, book midwife, and leader of transformational writing retreats. And Starcat's Right Stuff explores the art and craft of writing a book, whether or not you've ever done it before, in a way that's fun and accessible. I'm really excited. Today we're talking with Jennifer Moore, author of Empathic Mastery. So let's welcome my friend and colleague, Jen. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Nikki, it's so good to be here.
Well, thank you for coming in. Your garden looks great.
Thank you. Thank you. It certainly feels like it's been a long, strange trip, and you've been part of it. Yeah.
So just to start by telling us a bit about yourself and what you do in the world and how you came to be an author.
Oh, let me see. So I am a mentor and a healer for highly sensitive empathic women who struggle with all of the thoughts, the feelings, the stuff that is just they're absorbing from the world around them, and how to go from basically picking it all up and just spinning their wheels in empathic overwhelm to actually being able to use their gifts to make a difference in this world. And I do this because I am a card-carrying empath myself and really had to learn how to navigate the world so that I wasn't just constantly tanking like 24/7 and sinking into pits of despair. So at this point in time, that's pretty much what I do. Is I write about it, I talk about it, I teach about it, and just really my mission is to help other empaths in this world. So how did I become a writer? I am what I would call, I don't know if you ever read the book Illusions by Richard Bach, which sort of the tagline is, the handbook of the reluctant Messiah. And I guess I would say that I am a reluctant writer, that I have been writing my entire life. I've been, I had my first little locked orange journal from Woolworths when I was probably 7 years old, or diary back then.
Yeah.
And the thing about it was that I would start projects and then I would work for a little while and then I'd kind of get bored, because I started my sort of creative process as a visual artist. And so I've always been more inclined to express myself through visual things than necessarily just through the written word. But I've had this push-pull, love-hate relationship with writing my entire life. And to add insult to injury, dyslexia runs in my family. And while my siblings both really got hit hard with it, I had it just enough to make it a problem, but not so bad that I got much help for it. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess to sort of finish this question, basically, I realized that I really needed to share what I'd learned over the last 35 years of my life about how to manage being so sensitive and empathic. Because what I kept finding in my work with other people as a healer was that so many people were struggling with unidentifiable feelings of anxiousness and sadness and anger and all kinds of intense emotions that they couldn't even place, and finding it hard to be out in public, finding it hard to move forward and to take steps and to live their life. And what I kept noticing was that the common factor among all of these women was that they were all highly sensitive and empathic, and that they didn't even realize how much being empathic was impacting every single aspect of their life. And so that was when I started really developing the work for empaths, and realized that I absolutely had to write this book to be able to spread it to a much, much wider audience than I could possibly do with one-on-one coaching or even in group programs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love the card-carrying empath.
Yeah.
I'm one too, raising my hand.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
a lot of creative women are empaths.
Yes.
So it seems to
Yes.
go together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that makes sense. There weren't the tools, especially years ago, There weren't
No,
descriptions.
nobody had the tools, and everybody
So
was
it's like,
always
what's wrong with you?
exactly what, you know, oh, you're too sensitive, you're making too big a deal out of it, just get over it, you've got an overactive imagination, why are you reacting so strongly, what's your problem with this? And just total invalidation for the fact that we pick up stuff. One of the things I started saying a while ago is don't judge your rainbow by colorblind standards. And the thing is that we live in a world where, you know, sort of the energy and emotions are basically, it's like a colorblind rainbow here. Muggles are the people who are defining what is considered the emotional norm in our world. And for those of us who are empathic, I think it's really hard because we see things that they just do not see. So to them, it really is kind of like, what are you seeing and why are you so worried about this? For us, it's like, I'm seeing a rainbow that you don't see. And so a big piece of what I really believe is that as empaths, we need to claim our rainbow and say, no, you guys are the ones who don't understand. We're the ones who see it more clearly.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
see a bigger picture. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what would you like us to know about the book? I'm very excited about the book being out.
Oh my God, I am so excited about the book being out. I mean, talk about a labor of love. You know, so the book is, I love this book. I am so proud of this book. I'm so excited about this book. And this book was definitely, it took a village because it was absolutely just, it's all about being empathic. So the first half of the book is about what it means to be an empath, why we're different than other people, how we're different than other people, and how this impacts us in the world. And just having an understanding of a lot of these things can really start helping us to shift and also to validate stuff that maybe we've been invalidated about for our entire life. So that's part one of the book. And then part two is the 5-step system that I have developed over the last, God only knows how many years, for managing being highly sensitive and empathic. And the system can work for anybody on the spectrum, because what I really believe is that empathy is a spectrum, and that there are the people who are somewhat aware of other people's feelings that I would sort of call the compassionate carer, where they're conscious of the fact that other people are feeling feelings, that if they see a lot of emotion, they might sort of feel their heartstrings getting pulled by it, and they're impacted by the emotions and the events going on in the world around them. And then there are the people who I call the extreme empaths, who are the ones who are so highly sensitive that they are picking up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the physical sensations and pain, sometimes, you know, of the entire world around them. That they're so absorbent that they can't distinguish between themselves and other people. They are often in touch with ghosts. Sometimes they're in touch with extraterrestrials. Sometimes they're in touch with, you know, beings from other dimensions and realms. And they also are often just really immersed fully in this experience. And so it can be extremely hard to recognize why we're feeling what we're feeling and how to adjust it, how to address it, how to clear it. And so the book is really designed to support all aspects of empathy, whether you are somebody on sort of the mild side of empathy, where, you know, you're definitely affected when other people are having a hard time or something bad goes on in the world, versus the people who are just drowning in the emotional and psychic and energetic soup. And particularly, you know, where for some people it goes so far as that they're not even in this time zone, that they are picking up things from the past. They're picking up things from the future. They are just immersed in all of the intensity going on in the world around them, or that has gone on in the world around them. So that's sort of a long explanation about who I'm talking to. But the system is basically a 5-step system that is recognize, release, protect, connect, and act. And the whole thing about this is that one of the things I've discovered over the years is that a lot of the advice out there, particularly on psychic development, is all about teaching people how to open themselves more, to receive more information. And I'm sure you know, as a highly sensitive empathic person yourself, that the last thing those of us who are like super sensitives and extreme empaths need is more information. We struggle with TMI, and we do not need somebody to be telling us, we do not need more information flooding in. What we need is support in recognizing what's going on and parsing out what's happening and being able to distinguish what's mine, what's not mine. So the first step of being empathic is not either opening ourselves to be more psychic, or the other thing that so often these magical trainings do is they teach you how to bubble up. And, you know, just put a little pretty ball of pink light all around you and everything's going to be groovy. But my thing is, what I've discovered with everybody I've worked with over the years is that if you have already absorbed all the stuff and you put a pink bubble of light all around it, it's kind of like taking a dirty sponge and throwing it into a jar and putting the lid on. It's not going to get rid of the stuff that's on the inside. And so then it festers and it rots and it gets really gross and smelly. And so the thing is, in order to effectively address our empathic nature, we first have to recognize what's ours and what's not ours. Then we have to release the stuff that is no longer serving us and basically kind of wring out that sponge. Or another metaphor I have is it's like having a bathwater, you know, or a bathtub filled with dirty bathwater. And, you know, if you just try to do a protection thing beforehand and pull the shower curtain around, you're still going to have that dirty bathwater. So the whole point of release is basically opening up the drain and letting all that stuff that is no longer serving us, that we've been picking up from other people, that we've been picking up from the world around us, letting all that stuff just like drain out. And then the third step is protect. And that is where most people start, is looking for protection. But like I said, if we don't recognize that we're in distress and it's not even ours, and we don't release the stuff that isn't ours, protection is only going to be so effective. Because the problem with this is that if we try to protect ourselves when we're still carrying all the stuff around, that emotional distress on the inside will basically diminish and deplete any kind of protective shields and filters that we're creating. So the third step after we've done the work of clearing things is to start really building up and fortifying our energetic and emotional filters and shields. And when I speak about emotional filters and shields, I'm actually talking about not just sort of the woo-woo psychic, you know, energy stuff. I'm also talking about practical boundaries and about strategies for being mindful of self-protection and recognizing when we as empaths throw ourselves under the bus and changing some of that behavior. So that is another piece of protection, is the mindfulness of what situations we put ourselves into and really being conscious of whether something is serving us or not serving us.
I like that you go into the ethics too behind it, because it's not just for our own, you know, benefit that we're not going to just rescue everyone in the world. It's also, it's not an ethical thing to do, to go and interfere with someone's process.
Exactly. Exactly. It is not appropriate to be interfering with somebody else's process. And, you know, one of the things that I often say, and I think it, you know, it's like, is that just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yes. And so one of my favorite sayings, and anybody who's worked with me for any period of time has heard me say, don't go there, little buckaroo, probably many, many times, because the thing is, as highly sensitive empathic people, we have the ability to enter into other people's energy bodies. We have the ability to often telepathically ping them and figure out what's going on. And what I want to say is that for highly sensitive empathic children growing up in stressful environments, and or, you know, even being in a conventional American school system, or possibly European school system, or any kind of conventional school system on the planet, it can be very hard to be an empathic child. The Muggle children can be really, really difficult to be around. They can be bullies. They can, at the very least, they don't understand us. And so a lot of us, and if we grow up in a family where there's, substance abuse, or there's a history of some other kind of abuse, or parents who are dealing with anxiety disorders, or they're highly sensitive and empathic and not managing it themselves, then what can happen is we start developing these skills or these tools, or I don't know if skills or tools, actually, that's not an accurate way to describe it. We develop these coping mechanisms to basically be able to probe and sense what's going on with other people so we can keep ourselves safe, because it's like anybody who's grown up in an environment with a volatile parent or a volatile teacher or a volatile kids around them is going to want to know when that powder keg is ready to be set off and stay the ever living F away. And so as a result, a lot of empaths learn to do this thing that I call pinging, where what we do is we sort of just probe somebody and reach in. The problem with that is that it actually impacts somebody else's energy field, and they sense that whether they're conscious of it or not, and they don't like it because we are violating their boundary. We're violating their space. Now, as children, we don't know any better. And so it's sort of, we're innocent and we don't know any better and we're doing the best we can. But at a certain point, once we start to become a conscious empath, or what I call a responsible empath, then it becomes a deliberate choice as to whether we go beyond the awareness of somebody's distress and actually start to climb into their energy body beyond their filter and shield and actually start to suss out what's going on with them. And in my personal opinion, unless we have permission to do that, it is not appropriate. And I guess I'll just offer a perspective, because so often, actually, I've got 2 points. One is that one of the reasons why as empaths we so frequently want to do this is because we feel better when other people feel better. So if we sense somebody who's in a state of distress, we're going to come along and we're going to want to fix it because we feel lousy when other people feel lousy, until we learn to start grounding, shielding, and actually like letting it go and holding the space for discomfort. And interestingly, part of what really makes a difference is part of what really makes a difference is our ability to hold the space for our own discomfort and to not freak out when we're feeling emotionally stressed out. So if we can be present to our own extreme grief, to our own anger, to our own blueness, to our own fear and anxiety, it's much easier to be present to other people's without having to try to race in and fix it. And so that is, I think, one of the reasons why as empaths we're so frequently inclined to engage, is the fact that we do feel better. But what I've noticed is that while we can always see what needs to be fixed in somebody else, in general as human beings, we loathe being told what we need to fix about ourselves. And so I always like to suggest, put yourself in the other position. How would you feel if somebody suddenly decided that you needed energetic intervention and you needed somebody to be like tampering in your mind and energy body and fixing you when you weren't ready to do it? And, I know from my own personal experience that pretty much all of the lasting, sustainable changes I've made in my life have been made when I was ready, not when anybody else thought I was ready or thought I needed to. So I offer that as sort of a perspective for any empath who's kind of like, but they're so broken, I have to fix them. It's like, yeah, and when you were so broken, how did you feel when somebody decided they had to fix you? Probably not so hot. Yeah. So it's like, this is where let go, let God really comes in. And then from that protect, and also this whole aspect of our personal boundaries about things, we come to connect, because as I'm sure you've heard, the universe abhors a vacuum. And the thing is that once we have released the negativity, we need to replace it with something positive. And so instead of just kind of wandering around and waiting to pick up the next random feeling, the best thing we can do is become vessels for divine source, become channels for light, and open ourselves up to receive and to be plugged into the energy of the universe. Because so many people in this culture, the way I like to think of it is we live on battery packs, that we are running around trying to power everything on our own. And the problem with this is that, like the Energizer Bunny, we run down at a certain point and we don't have anything left, like all the juice is gone. And when we're younger, we can last on our juice for a fairly good period of time. But as we age, we start to really feel that depletion. And so, and I would say even once you're starting to get into your mid-20s, that depletion really starts to happen. And so Connect is all about being plugged into the universe, being plugged into divine source, being plugged into a force or a power greater than yourself. And I'm not talking
a rechargeable battery, right?
Exactly. You're becoming a rechargeable battery, or, you know, like my computer right now, because I forgot to recharge my computer. My computer is running on, my computer is plugged in and running off the grid.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, this is about us running off the grid or on the grid, as opposed to trying to do it on ourselves or do it all by ourselves. And I just want to say that this is not a religious system. It is a spiritual system. And I am a dyed-in-the-wool universalist, in the sense of both in the traditional historical sense of all people are saved in God's love, which is the original concept of the universalists. And I'm also sort of a universalist, little u universalist, or actually little c Catholic, which also means universal, in the sense that I sincerely believe that God is so much bigger, vaster, and more inconceivable than any puny human brain has the capacity to understand. And who am I to define your relationship with deity? So whatever name you choose to call it, whether you want to call it the force, whether you want to call it, love, whether you want to call it Cthulhu, whether you want to call it Jesus, Mary, whether you want to call it God, whether you want to call it Goddess, Aphrodite, Demeter, Bridget, whoever you are working with, it does not matter. The Ganesh, who I'm wearing right around my neck right now, whatever name you have for your higher power, that is your personal choice. So that's step number 4. And then finally, step number 5 is act, because the thing is, words without works is dead. And if we do not change our behavior and continuously sustain this new way of living by living in a new way, we will pick up the toxicity, we will pick up the negativity, we will start spinning our wheels, we will find ourselves drowning in overwhelm again. Yeah. And so as a result, it's absolutely imperative that we learn to act in a new way. And that actually kind of leads back to the piece you and I were talking about, which is the ethics of being a responsible empath and not just taking on absolutely everybody else's stuff or feeling like we have to fix everything.
Well, and seeing, I like the way that you're teaching people to see, to deal with, yes, the repercussions of living as an empath, but also to see it as a gift and then decide what can you do with your gifts?
What can you do with your gifts? Yeah.
Shove them into other people's energy system, but what can you do? How can you invite people to work with you and to, use your gifts in that way, or to write a book or a play or, make a painting or whatever your particular passion is? How can you use that empathy to do those things?
Absolutely. Because we are, those of us who are the super sensitives and extreme empaths, and I have a system for sort of just defining where you fall on the rainbow. There's all kinds of tests and ideas about what it means to be an empath nowadays, in terms of, you can find a million, if you Google empath, I'm sure you can find a million quizzes. And so, but if you want to go take my quiz, if you go to empathicwoman.com, it will basically tell you where you land on the empathic spectrum. And there's 5 places where you can land. There's what I call the objective observer, who is sort of the very, very sort of obtuse, looking at the world, really not affected by anybody else, and just able to kind of chug along and go about their business. If they are being affected by other things going on in the world, they're not aware of it. Then there's what I call the Pragmatic Receiver, who's somebody who can really perceive things and understand why people are feeling the way they're feeling, and can have a great deal of kindness and compassion for this, but not necessarily be you know, bowled over by it. And then we start moving into the, you know, moving more into where empathy really is affecting us. So then we have what I call the compassionate carer, who is somebody who's very sensitive to people's needs, but again, who still has enough of a filter and shield that they're not being overwhelmed by the pain and suffering going on in the world around them. And then the super sensitive is the person who is really starting to be like a psychic sponge, who's picking up all of the intensity that's going on in the world around them. And then, as I mentioned before, the extreme empath is the one who sometimes is so flooded that they don't even know what time zone they're in, that they don't even know, you know, that and distinguishing between self and other can be very, very difficult. And a lot of times we think we know who we are, but then after a lot of examination, we start to realize, wait a second, this isn't even mine. This was my mom's shit, or this was my husband's stuff, or this was coming from when I was 6 years old and that person was feeling it. And I, you know, and it basically just like jumped onto me like a Klingon, and I've been carrying it ever since.
Or even, you know, something that happened in a past life that's now
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And although I actually think of a past life as actually more of our personal karma and personal responsibility. So I see that as something that is connected to our identity versus something where we really are taking on another person's belief or feeling or pain. So when it comes to the gifts of being empathic, what I absolutely love about it is the ways that we can use being highly sensitive and empathic. And where, when we are not managing it, when we're not being a responsible empath, we are often just completely flooded with the thoughts, feelings, energy of the world going around us. And like, one of the things I've discovered is that being highly sensitive and empathic is definitely on a spectrum. And so there are people where they may be slightly aware of what's going on in the world around them, and sometimes worried about the, you know, like recent affairs, but not bowled over by what's happening, to the other extreme that I was speaking about, where it's like somebody doesn't even know who they are, what they are, where they're going. And for more information about this, and if you want to see where you fall on the empathic spectrum, go to empathicwoman.com to take my What's Your Empathic Type quiz, which basically scales it from objective observer on one side to extreme empath on the other. And what I've discovered is that most of the people that I work with fall in the top 3 categories of either compassionate carer, super sensitive, or extreme empath. So the thing about being this kind of empathic person is that when we don't have control of it, it has control of us. But once we start to really be able to recognize what's ours and not ours, release the stuff we don't want to carry around anymore, and really become these beacons for light, then we really do get to start using our gifts. And the thing that's amazing about it is that we really are plugged into the universe in a way that the ordinary muggle is not. So that means that we have access to incredible creativity. We have access to like the music of the spheres. And so when it comes to writing, when it comes to making art, when it comes to cooking, when it comes to making music, when it comes to doing math, when it comes to being a research scientist, when it comes to being of service to people, when it comes to serving as a healer, we are plugged in a way that allows us to be aware and to contribute at a whole other level. And one of the things that with consent we can do as highly sensitive empathic people, assuming we want to do this, is that we are very good at tuning in and determining or helping to tease out what's going on for somebody else. So we actually are really great with diagnostic stuff. So empaths make great medical intuitives. Empaths make great intuitive coaches and psychic readers and healers and social workers and psychotherapists. But I will add a caveat to that. We make great XYZs once we've learned to deal with our stuff.
Right.
So actually, let me rephrase that. Responsible empaths make great healers and advisors and mentors and coaches and supporters in general. But if we do not deal with it, and if we have not taken care of it, the urgency that comes up when we put our hands on or come into contact with somebody in distress can be so overwhelming for us that we can either feel this incredible need to fix things, which, going back to that ethical thing, not appropriate, that we can feel this incredible need to fix things. And so that's going to drive our bus and create this really sort of intense power struggle between us and the people we work with. Or we can also find ourselves becoming completely depleted and exhausted, and also walking away from all of our work again and again, feeling like crap and not knowing why we are blue, not knowing why we are scared, not knowing why we are just so frustrated and angry, because nothing in our life mirrors that experience. And that's because if we are not protecting ourselves and doing our work and sharing our gifts, we will often take on more than we need to. Mm-hmm. So being a responsible empath and using our gifts appropriately in the world means knowing how to stay grounded and not finding ourselves in this position where we're just taking on all the things. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Such a good book and so needed.
Yes. Yes.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk some about your process of writing this book. So I know you alluded to your struggle with writing per se.
Yes.
What was the most challenging part of writing this book?
I would say there are a couple things that were challenging parts with writing this book. First off, I just want to say that one of the big challenges that I only recently really came in touch with when I was doing some healing work with another colleague was the fundamental belief that I was born, that I kind of inherited as a child, which was, you're smart, you should be able to figure this out for yourself. And so I was one of those kids who got a lot of, you're not living up to your potential, and if you would just apply yourself, you would do so well. And what I realized recently was that that is the biggest line of bullshit ever, because the thing is, it has to do with the fact that nobody ever taught me how to do these things. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that I should just know how to write a book is a really hindering thing. Because there's a lot, I think most people sort of have this idea, if they've never tried to write a book, that you should just sit down and start writing. And on one hand, that's true. But on the other hand, there's a process in order to be clear enough so that you're not just getting stuck and sort of like spinning your wheels and finding yourself completely confused. Mm-hmm. So for me, just getting over the initial hump of the worthiness to write the book and the overwhelm about having so many thoughts and ideas and being able to start, drilling down and dialing it in and getting it clear. So just doing that was the first step. And what I realized was that if you haven't figured it out from just even listening to this interview, I'm an incredibly verbal person. So what I discovered was that the way I would be able to get this information out there more effectively was actually by having a group of women who I trusted and loved come and gather around me so that I could basically channel the material and speak all of the things that I had been working with for years and then have it transcribed. And so doing that opened up the possibility and allowed it to be possible. So 3 years and a month ago now, or a little bit, actually 3 years and like 6 weeks ago now, I basically hosted an event at my friend's sort of spiritual center with a very close-knit group of friends, and basically spent 3 days just channeling the basic content of the book. And then once I did that, I did a second round of the same thing as a basically 8-week class with a couple additional sort of bonus weeks in it. And then all of that material went to the transcriber. And then that's where you come in. You got handed the raw material. Actually, you came in, there were two people there was a couple things that happened before that, which was that before you even came in, I had a conversation with our mutual friend, Michelle Thompson, who's also a writer. And Michelle and I basically hammered out the big why of the book and hammered out the flow of the book so that we knew what the outline was looking like and the way that it needed to be parsed out. And from that, once we had that, and I also had the really clear understanding of why I was writing this book, which actually came from another person who's been incredibly helpful for me, my book shepherd, Diana Needham. And Diana and I really worked out why was I writing this and for who was I writing this. And so with those two pieces, then I handed all of the content and then the thankless task of combing through all that material, because we're talking hundreds and hundreds of pages that you then basically combed through and found all of the jewels, and you helped me to weave it together by doing the content editing. And so you would hope that that would be how a book would be done, and that was all it took. But oh no, no, no. Then came the next hurdle, which was getting my ass in the chair and sitting down with this extremely rough draft and going in and writing the book. So I basically had the bones of the book from the content editing you did. But then what I absolutely had to do was I had to go back into every single thing and add to it, clarify things, really unpack the rest of it.
And make transitions between things.
Make transition between things, add anecdotal stories, explain what I really meant by this so that it wasn't just like, what the hell are you even talking about? And so where it started at, I don't know, maybe I would say you had probably like cobbled it into something between maybe 45,000 words or so. It ended up being 107,000, almost 107,000 words, and it's 372 pages. But I think it's probably by the when all is said and done, you know, it may end up having a couple more pages because.
And we also took, like, you had someone else come in and kind of take out some of the hands-on action things, because I know as a reader, and I've just talked, like I was just talking with someone about this yesterday, if there's so many action items to take, it can really slow down.
It can absolutely slow you down and bog you down. Yeah. And so actually, right. And not make it readable. And so that was actually, and that wasn't even the next step. The next step was that once I had gotten the book, my draft done, then it went to my proofreader, who is a dear friend of mine who's been an executive secretary and a proofreader for the last like almost 40 years of her life, or 35 years of her life. And so she really knows her shit. And she also has been reading my writing since 1994. So she knows my stuff in a way that nobody else does. And so she could speak in my voice. And so I handed the baby over to her, and then she took a scalpel to it and cleaned it up in terms of the proofreading. And I think I want to say something, because it's almost like I just heard a thought of some listener right now going, well, what if you can't afford to do this? And I guess what I want to say is writing a book is an investment in your future. And writing a good book and having a good book is the difference between something that's going to wither on the vine and something that is actually going to go somewhere. And if you were investing in any other aspect of your business and you wanted to do it well, you need to be willing to have some skin in the game and willing to invest. And so for me, hiring all of these different editors to participate in the process was a very big part of my commitment to make this the best book it could possibly be. Because if I was left to my own devices, it would be an okay book, but it certainly would not be nearly as accessible and nearly as readable as it is, because it has been through so many other hands. And that leads me to that final edit. Once we had gone through and, and then Diana did a proofread, but actually before Diana did, we had the really sort of the content edit, or you did the content edit, then Amy did the copy edit, and then it went to my friend Arlie, who did what we called the book zhuzh, where she went and removed all of the extraneous action items. She took out the stuff that was kind of like not really in my voice, and the stuff that distracted from the primary point of the book. Because sometimes you just can't see the forest for the trees. And especially when you've been working on a book for nearly 3 years or more, at that point it had been nearly 3 years, it gets to be a point where you get bogged down and you need another set of eyes. So that was sort of the final sort of like comb through. Then it went to Diana for a sort of a scan for proofread and for typos. Then it went to the formatters. Then I got to go through line by line by line by line and go, oh, please change this to this. Please capitalize this. Please move these two chunks of text from this page to this page. Yeah. And that, so it's an incredibly involved process. And what I really want to say about it is, because it's such an incredibly involved process, breaking it down into manageable incremental chunks is absolutely essential.
In your book, I think too, you were dealing with, like you said, 30 years of material. You have so much good content, and now I know you have other book ideas that have sprung out of this. And books that you have material for,
and the tarot book, which has literally been sitting on my, oh God bless me. I mean, the tarot book has been sitting on my hard drive since like. The deck was published in 1997, and the book was probably started sometime in 95, and I've been carrying it around ever since. And, and then at your writing retreat, I finally circled back around to it and went, guess what, girlfriend, it's time to go back into this and work on this book. So I have the tarot book that is kind of in the works to be the companion to the tarot deck that I published back in 97, and I just re-released about 1.5 years ago. It's called The Healing Tarot. And then, so that's a book. I've also got a book on, working on how to work with ancestral healing that's going to be coming up sometime in the next year or so. And then also, what it means to be particularly an empathic entrepreneur, and how not only, as I've said, being highly sensitive empathic impacts all aspects of our life. But when it comes to making money, it's a real pain in the butt. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of characteristics that I have found impact empathic entrepreneurs specifically. And so I actually ran a beta program about 7-8 months ago now that was all about being an empathic entrepreneur. And that is going to be sort of the roots of that particular book. So
just remind you that the seed of that, like you even had some of that stuff in the original book manuscript, the transcript, because you had, kind of done a workshop for a business group that you'd put in, so there was a lot of material. So I think, your process was kind of complicated by the fact that there was so much material and so much
content. And it's a wonderful problem to have, but I also want to say that I think that that's really a problem for empaths who have not wrung out the sponge, that we are picking up information nonstop. And when you become an open channel for divine source, and the muse in particular decides that, realizes that you are an active, you're taking orders. It's kind of like being like an Amazon warehouse where you got to be on roller skates and moving from order to order to order faster than you can possibly make it, because the universe is so excited to find human beings who are willing to implement. Yes. And that willingness to implement means that you will never be lacking for ideas. Elizabeth Gilbert talks about it in Big Magic, and she talks about ideas being their own thing and how they look for places to be born. And the good news is that if it's not me and if it's not you, somebody else is going to give birth to it. It's striking to me how since I received the message, the clarion call to write the book about being highly sensitive and empathic, a whole bunch of other people have done it too. And, you know, the thing was, my book had to be a certain way, and it was not a simple ebook. It was definitely not like a 103-page business card. This is basically a tome. This is my magnum opus, my first magnum opus.
Yeah.
This is my Bible. This is my dictionary. This is my encyclopedia. This is the resource guide that I have anticipated for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me 3 years to bring it into reality because it was so complex and I was parsing so much information. That said, now that I've had the chance to write this book, to work with you, to work with Amy, to work with Arlie, to work with Diana, to work with Michelle, and to work with all the readers who offered me, the beta readers who offered me feedback and support, what I've learned is that there are ways to keep it simpler and I don't have to reinvent the wheel completely.
Yeah, so this kind of leads into, so what's the best piece of advice you have for those who are just beginning the process of writing their first book?
I would say that for one thing, if you are like me and you are easily excited by many, 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 many different ideas, really be asking yourself, does this reinforce the central message within the story or within the book? And is this driving toward, are we, I just thought of Patton Oswalt and the sort of swimming away from pie or swimming towards pie, but, I don't know, unless you're a Patton Oswalt fan, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's like, are we swimming towards the message in the book? Are we swimming away from the message in the book? Are we doing things that are going to contribute to it, or are we doing things that are going to be a distraction from it? And it's really, one thing that can happen is, and then you end up with, sometimes you just have an idea and you got to get it on the page, but then it can go into the, this is my sort of folder of extra ideas that I can repurpose sometime later. But I guess I would say the three things. One is, does this lead to your mission, your message? And in the sense of the two things that made all the difference in the world for me was, one, getting really clear about what my big why was. Why was I writing this book? And I talk about it in the book, but I'll just briefly say that for me, it was two specific empathic women. One killed herself. One basically committed suicide within about a month of my running the first workshop because she just couldn't take it anymore. It was too fucking painful. And the other one did not jump off the bridge. She made a phone call, asked for help, and she kept passing the open windows. And for me, knowing that if somebody has the tools, it really is the difference between life and death. I just was like, how can I not write this book? So that's my big why. And knowing what your big why is going to drive it, especially on the days where you do not want to sit down in the chair and write. And then secondly, knowing your outline, like really having hammered out like the flow of the book in advance is so helpful, instead of because otherwise you're going to just get dragged around by your thoughts and ideas and by your muse, who may be like really excited, but actually bringing you an idea for somebody else's novel about, a science project down in the Amazon jungle. Right. Again, Liz Gilbert reference, but, And so those are the two things that I really, it's like, what is your big why and what is your outline? And then thirdly, how do you just find your way through getting your ass in the chair and just sitting down and doing it? Yeah. Because that is the one thing about being a writer. The only way out is through, and the only way to write is by sitting your butt down and doing it.
Yeah. And to have those containers for doing, I love that, we didn't talk about this in advance, but your three things are really, those are the things that I work with clients with when they first come to me with a book idea, is you need to have your big why, or what I work with them as an intention for the book. and then you need to have create your sacred container, which is your outline for the book, and then your container for your writing habit. And I know you have a particular ritual that you kind of do when you're sitting down to work on your book.
Yeah, it really depends on, it depends on whether my husband, who's a drummer, is drumming or not, where I actually decide to do this. But one of the things that I discovered was that I kind of had to sort of cloister myself and do this sort of series of things. So one of the things that I did is I used essential oils that were for concentration and calming. I would often use EFT tapping, which is, otherwise known as emotional freedom technique, to sort of sink myself into the process and kind of dial in. I would actually, at the very beginning, go on Facebook and basically be accountable and tag you and a couple other of my sort of the people I was accountable to for the book, saying I'm going in for the next couple hours, like check on me later. But just that I was stating, I was declaring the choice to do the work. And then what I was doing was I was sitting down and I put on YouTube channels with the solfeggio frequencies, which are basically running binaural beats that are going to help with concentration. And, and then the other thing that I am very fortunate to have, because as a Lyme survivor, if being a Lyme survivor is something you can feel lucky about, is that one of the technologies that I used to heal myself was actually working with a Rife machine. And Rife machines generate radio frequencies that can affect all kinds of different aspects of our cells and our energy. And so there are channels specifically for concentration and for clarity and focus. So what I would do is I'd plunk myself down in front of with YouTube on the television, streaming on the TV with binaural music, with the diffuser going, and with the diffuser going, and then with the Rife machine running frequencies, and me sitting with the computer in front of me and just being like, suck it up, buttercup, and type. Now, conversely, our mutual friend Chase Young approached it in a completely different way as the mother of 4 daughters, where she basically carved out like 10-15-minute chunks at a time in order to write. So I'm very lucky. I'm not a parent, nor do I play one on TV. I do play a fairy godmother. So I have the freedom of not having to worry about littles. And so what I've found for myself is I write best in larger chunks of time, because it really takes my brain a good 20 minutes to a half hour just to be in sync, to be able to really start to write. At least write large stuff. Yeah. Conversely, ironically, writing ad copy, I can do on the fly at this point in time.
It's very different with different types of writing.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, just before we wrap up here, let me just ask you what it is that you, and I know because you mentioned your struggles a little bit with the effects of dyslexia and all that. I know you like to listen to audiobooks more than actually read, but let me just call it read. What do you like to read or take in?
Okay, so I am an avid fan for nonfiction. I absolutely adore good self-help, spiritual enlightenment, transformational books, and nerdy books about food and neuropsychology and things, or and just like how we function in the world. And so I really love, and I also love books about prosperity and money mindset. So right now on my bookshelf, I have Tosha Silver's book, It's Not Your Money, which is one of my all-time favorite books. I freaking adore it. I have Erin Morgenstern's newest book that's coming out very shortly on my wait list, and that I will probably read as an actual, I'll probably read it on my Kindle just so that I have the freedom of being able to see it, when I'm not like in the darkness, but so that I'm not reliant on light to be able to read the book. But I absolutely, one of my all-time favorite books that I really did read was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And so I love, when it comes to fiction, I'm very picky. I absolutely love magical realism. So like Neil Gaiman, Erin Morgenstern, Tom Robbins, one of the early authors in this particular category and genre. I also adore, like I worship Liz Gilbert. I worship her writing. I worship her fiction, and I worship her nonfiction probably even more. Big Magic is absolutely at the very top of my list. I've listened to that audiobook like 3 times all the way through. It has been, it speaks to creativity in a way that no other book ever has for me. And I agree with 100% of what she is saying. I just, you know, Liz Gilbert, if you're listening to this, I love you. I love you. I love you. You're the best. Oh God, I love her so much. I love her authenticity. And she and Liz, and I will say, Liz Gilbert, Brené Brown, Glennon Doyle, these are the women, and Tosha Silver, these are the women who inspire me every single day to be really, really naked in my writing. That, you know, this is not about looking good. This is not about saving my ass. This is not about saving my ass or like, you know, getting X1,000 or, you know, 6 figures of likes or 1 million likes on my XYZ platform. And, you know, being like this sparkly, shiny angel standing on a stage. This is about being as real as I possibly can be and extending my hand. You know, Patti Smith, the rock and roll heroine, goddess, priestess of punk rock back in the 70s and early 80s, she said, those who have suffered understand suffering and thereby extend their hand. And to me, that's what this is all about, is like, if I can possibly let you know, I know how much it hurts, that I know how hard it is, that I know what it's like to go through this stuff, and do it in a way that does not make me look like I've got my shit together. I am so slick and together. Look at me. That, you know, but just really, really, really be as raw and real as possible. That's what I'm inspired by. And, you know, Liz, Tosha, Brené, and Glennon are my heroes because they are the ones who are writing this way. And so, you know, these are the books I love. And then I will also make a shout out for Denise Duffield Thomas and her books Get Rich Lucky Bitch and also Chillpreneur, because those books are also really raw, really real, really tell it like it is, and really expansive for money mindset, and really open up the possibilities of like, oh my goodness, it doesn't have to be this hard. So I absolutely love Denise Duffield Thomas's work as well. So I could go on and on and on. I love I mean, when I was a child, I was a bookworm. I read a lot of books. But at this point, partially because I love doing so many other things at the same time, I'm more likely to listen to audiobooks. So like right now in my queue, I've got City of Girls by Liz Gilbert going. I've got Chillpreneur going by Denise Duffield Thomas. I've got Joe Dispenza's, oh God, being, you know, becoming an alchemist or something like that. You know, I've got a number of different books that are all running at the same time that I am, sort of like keep on coming back into my dear friend Chris Ferrara's book, Energy Healing, which I've already read through before. But again, it's one of those books that's just got so many jewels in it. It's like it takes multiple reads to really appreciate it. So those are some of the books that are on my bookshelf and in my life right now that I'm just adoring.
And for our viewers and listeners, it's really, I feel like you have done what you set out to do in terms of, in your book, of being that vulnerable and that open, because some of the stories that you tell and the ways that you share your journey and going from, you know, I love the subtitle, you're going from hot mess to thriving, you know, that's really.
Yeah, thriving success. And I mean, I'm not going to mince words. I was a fucking hot mess. I was a needy, clingy, demanding, emotionally overwhelming person who was constantly throwing myself into bad love relationships because I was so desperate to be loved. and really just, throwing myself under the bus constantly, putting myself into incredibly compromising situations where there are some of those stories in there of my glorious misspent youth. And I mean, sometimes I think about the fact that I'm still alive, and I actually at one point was at this meeting, and somebody came up to me after I'd spoken at the meeting, and somebody came up to me and said, I'm a statistician and I work for an insurance company, and you should not be alive. She said, your story and the number of car accidents that you've been through, because I've been through a lot of car accidents, and she's like, your story and what you've been through, you should be dead. God wants you on this planet for a reason. And, and that was just one of those moments where it was like an angel in human clothing just stepped forward and basically said, hey, just in case you're wondering, we spared you because you got some work to do. And, cut the shit and do it, basically. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, tell us where to find you and where to find the book.
Yes. Okay. So where to find me and where to find the book. If you go over to modernmedicinelady.com, you can find the hub of all things Jennifer. You could also go over to empathicmastery.com, which is hopefully, very soon it will go from being a website in progress to an actual, like all the bells and whistles, which will reach you or give you access to the book. And then if you want to just easily sign up for, if you go to modernmedicinelady.com, there's going to be a pop-up that's going to drop down. Just sign up for the newsletter, and that way you can learn exactly what's going on. You'll get all of the updates when things like, Black Friday specials come along. You'll be able to get, you'll be able to know about it in advance. There's going to be all kinds of opportunities, as well as when the other books come out. And one of the things that I've been in the works and I've been working on for a really long time now that I am so excited to be rolling out is Empathic Mastery Academy, which is a place where we get to, it's like the incubator where we get together, we get to dive in, we get to do the really super, super deep work together, and where I get to really support you, and you get a lot of hands-on, live, direct attention from me, where there's going to be a lot more engagement than necessarily just jumping onto a Facebook Live or reading a book. So where you can find me, the main hub is modernmedicinelady.com. And like I said, if you want to find out where you land on the empathic spectrum, go to empathicwoman.com. And then in case you just happen to be a fan of like Instagram and stuff like that, then I have an extremely active IG that I curate the ever living F out of. And that is at Empathic Woman. And also my Facebook page is Jennifer Moore .modern medicine lady. And that's another place where I offer a lot of free content, where I really, really just do my best to share the message as much as possible. So I know, but bottom line, go to modernmedicinelady.com. You can find all the rest of that stuff.
And read this book. You have to read this book.
Seriously. I mean, if I hadn't written it, I would be telling everybody, like, you have to read this book. I mean, as the writer, it can be a little awkward to be saying this book is the shiznit. Go read it.
But it is. It really is. The upside of having a whole village, helping you create it is to have the village shouting out about it. So
exactly. And to have the feedback from the village basically saying people need this book. Yeah. And this is the book we've been waiting for. And also that was another piece of the motivation to keep writing it, was when everybody kept saying, Jennifer, we need your book. We need your book. We need your book. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for being
here. Nikki, thank you so much. And I just also really want to say thank you so much for being the content editor, and for really being the person who was able to leverage me through the muck and get me over the hump that would have kept this book lingering or withering on the vine. And that is something I just want to say for anybody who's considering doing this work and who's particularly like, I wonder about what it would be like to work with Nikki, that I just want to say, I know that you have a very limited number of spaces available for doing this particular kind of work, and it is an investment. But if you are somebody where you've been hitting a hump and you're really wanting to get beyond the hump talk to Nikki about the ways she can help you, because the work, you know, it is priceless to get over the spinning your wheels and having the woulda, coulda, shouldas about writing the book to actually having a book done. Because, you know, it took me 3 years, but without Nikki and the team working with me, I could still be talking about this book 10 years from now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yay.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Nikki. This was amazing.